Chicago Bulls have won their first ever NBA championship.
It's safe to say that in the early 90s, Jordan and the Bulls absolutely owned the game of basketball. Michaeljordan transcended the game of basketball itself. And with Pippen hitting his prime and Phil Jackson guiding the way, the Chicago Bulls were simply unstoppable, winning 3 consecutive championships and absolutely dominating the entire NBA. But when Michaeljordan decided to step away to play baseball in 1993, it opened the door for a new set of contenders to emerge in the East. And those contenders included the indianaPacers, and Reggie Miller. While Jordan was away, Reggie quickly established himself as one of the premier playoff performers in all of basketball, delivering memorable clutch performances against the Knicks both in 1994 and 95. Reggie quickly became known as a player who could deliver quick bursts of offense in the most critical of moments. In the playoffs, he consistently found ways to elevate his game to superstar levels. And he led an Indiana team that you could definitely say was greater than the sum of its parts, relying heavily on depth, balance, and key contributions from across their core rotation. Reggie was also known as one of the great instigators and trash talkers in the league. And not even Michael himself could escape this. Let's just say that these two players never saw eye to eye. In 1993, they famously got into a scuffle which led to both fines and suspensions.
Now Michaeljordan and Reggie Miller having a go at it. And I mean, we got fist throwing, here come the benches.
MJ also once famously said that playing against Reggie Miller was like chicken fighting with a woman. Once MJ decided to pick up a basketball again, in his first full season back, he played like a man possessed. Aided by the addition of another Hall of Famer, Dennis Rodman, and by key additions like Tony Kukoc and Steve Kerr, the Bulls didn't just compete, they absolutely destroyed the league, winning an NBA record 72 games and finishing the season off with the championship. And again, in 1997, the Bulls would almost match their record-breaking performance from the year before, winning 69 games and their 5th championship in 7 seasons. But despite their success, the Chicago front office had made up their mind. It was time to move on. Time to move on from Phil Jackson and time to rebuild this squad, even if that meant driving away the greatest player this game had ever seen and taking apart one of the greatest dynasties in NBA history, the NBA's team of the 90s. But despite the front office drama and distractions, the Chicago Bulls were determined to make their last dance a memorable one. The Bulls cruised through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs and reached the Eastern Conference Finals. But what they didn't realize was that waiting for them was the toughest challenge of their entire championship run. As Game 1 got underway, it was a masterstroke from Phil Jackson that caught the Pacers off guard and set the tone for this series. Right from the opening tip, the Bulls would have Scottie Pippen absolutely hound Mark Jackson, applying relentless full-court pressure on almost each and every possession. The Bulls had identified Mark Jackson as the key that unlocked the indianaPacers' entire offensive setup. And the strategy was simple. Have your best defender shut him down, and you disrupt everything they run. But in spite of this, it was still the Pacers that jumped out to an early advantage, getting some unexpected offense from Dale Davis. who somehow led all scorers with 8 points in the first quarter. The Bulls had their early offensive struggles, and it took all of 6 minutes for Michaeljordan to get his first points in the game. And his first bucket would ignite his teammates as the Bulls would go on an 8-0 run.
Kukoc, touch pass to Harper, and on an 8-0 run, the Bulls have claimed their first lead.
But on the very next possession, Reggie Miller would step out and score his first points of this series to break the Bulls' momentum and silence the Chicago crowd.
Did you hear the sigh in the United Center when that shot went in? It's, oh no, not Reggie.
This game was a masterclass in defense from both teams, and the Pacers held a 6-point advantage at the end of the first quarter. But the Pacers were failing to pull away from the Bulls in spite of the fact that Michaeljordan couldn't buy a basket in this first half. Jordan scored just 6 points, going 1 of 9 from the field. And along with Scottie and Tony Kukoc, the three main offensive weapons for Chicago would shoot a combined 3 for 24 from the floor. But if the Bulls were still in this game, it was largely thanks to Scottie's defense of Mark Jackson and the impact of Dennis Rodman. Rodman brought his usual set of unique contributions and intangibles to this game, whether it meant provoking reactions from the Pacers players to get inside their heads and throw them off their game, or breaking up plays and chasing after loose balls to create easy transition baskets for his teammates. Rodman was doing all the little things, the ones that don't show up on a box score, and he was bringing the Chicago crowd to life.
Say what you want about what happens off the court. His game can be captivating.
Rodman led the Bulls with 9 points and 7 rebounds in the first half, including back-to-back baskets to cut the Pacer lead to 3 heading into the break. As the second half got underway, it was now time for the Bulls' 1-2 punch to take over this game. The Bulls would double down on their strategy from the first half, and Pippen would spend every ounce of his energy in shutting down Mark Jackson. But the difference in this half was that the soon-to-be crowned league MVP would take Chicago's offense into his own hands. Michaeljordan would explode for 16 third-quarter points.
Well, how quickly do things change right out of the blocks in this third quarter?
MJ hit the Pacers with a little bit of everything, scoring 25 of his 31 points in the second half, making it clear that on the offensive end, Michaeljordan had completely taken over this game. With Scottie leading the way on defense and Michael taking care of the offense, the Indiana Pacers simply had no answers, and Chicago took Game 1 at home. Scottie Pippen scored just 4 points against the Pacers in Game 1, and he went scoreless in the entire second half. Yet you could easily argue that there was no other player that had a bigger impact on the outcome of the game. And his matchup with Mark Jackson was a true testament to his versatility as a defender, being able to guard 4 different positions on the court. Mark Jackson was an integral part of that Pacer team. He was among the league's best when it came to assist-to-turnover ratio. But Pippen's defense in Game 1 forced him into having 7 turnovers for his 6 assists. But Jackson's importance to Indiana went far beyond those numbers. Both of Indiana's primary offensive weapons, Reggie Miller and Rick Smits, heavily depended on Indiana being able to set up their half-court offense. For Rick Smits, establishing himself in the post was absolutely key, while Reggie Miller was a player who thrived in constant motion. Both of these players relied heavily on their playmaker feeding them the ball in order to be effective. With Pippen tying up their point guard in Game 1, Miller and Smits would combine for just 25 points on the night. Indiana was a team that averaged 14 turnovers a game during the regular season. In this game, they gave the ball up 26 times, and the Bulls scored 27 points off of those turnovers. If Indiana was going to come back in this series, it was clear they had to take care of the ball better, and they had to find a way to execute their offense. Before tip-off in Game 2, Michaeljordan was presented with his 5th and final MVP trophy. And the most celebrated athlete of his time would use this game to make a statement. Even though Indiana had jumped out to a 7-point advantage at halftime, it was once again the Bulls' stifling defense that would not let the Pacers settle into their game, forcing them into 20 turnovers. And when it came to the offense, just like he did in Game 1, Michaeljordan took over the game in the second half. Jordan scored 24 of his 41 points in the final 2 quarters of the game. MJ shot 13 of 22 from the floor, shooting 59% and making all the big plays down the stretch.
MJ comes off the screen, drives, stops, fades, fire!
Jordan and the Bulls took Game 2 and seemingly took control of the series as well.
Seemed to me like Chicago was just toying with us. Every time we got close, they extended out, and we come back and they extend it out.
You play for this time of year, and we've come too far to let something like this slip away.
Game 2 told a familiar story. The Indiana Pacers were still struggling to find answers to the problems created by the Chicago Bulls in Game 1. Mark Jackson and the Pacers failed to protect the basketball yet again, giving it up 20 times in Game 2. The other problem haunting them was, of course, Michaeljordan. Jordan was averaging 36 points per game in the first 2 games of this series and was absolutely owning his matchup with Reggie Miller. And while nobody expected Reggie to be Michael's equal, let's not forget who we're talking about here. Reggie Miller was one of the premier clutch shot makers in the NBA and was one of the most feared playoff performers of the 1990s. And coming into the series against Chicago, Miller had a career playoff scoring average of more than 24 points per game. But perhaps the biggest contribution that Miller made with his play was the emotional lift that he provided to this Pacer team. With his team now struggling for survival in this series, Miller had to be the one to carry Indiana back into contention. So as the series shifted to Market Square Arena for Game 3, the Pacers would look for ways to finally unlock their offense, and the Pacers would look to Reggie Miller. As the series shifted to Market Square Arena, the Bulls found themselves greeted not just by a hostile crowd, but also by a rejuvenated Pacer team. Right from the opening minutes of this game, the Pacers pushed the tempo and Reggie Miller came out firing. Unlike the first 2 games on the road, the Pacers' ball movement and Reggie's movement off the ball were both crisp and sharp. Reggie was aggressively looking for his shot as he exploded for 9 quick points in the first quarter.
3 for 3 on his home court after shooting just 9 for 27 through the first 2 in Chicago.
The Pacers also made the necessary adjustments to help free up Mark Jackson. Anytime Jackson was pressured, another Pacer would step in to help bring the ball up the floor. Indiana was also extremely physical with Scottie Pippen right from the opening quarter. And they weren't just looking to wear him down. They were looking to send a message to the entire Bulls team. On back-to-back possessions, they knocked Scottie Pippen to the floor. And their tactics worked because on the very next play, the Bulls responded by taking Pippen off of Mark Jackson. And almost immediately, Jackson was able to find the space he needed to create chances for his teammates. Pippen was, however, having his best offensive game of this series.
It's a 3-on-1 with only Best back, and Pippen slams it in his face.
Behind 8 first-quarter points from Scottie Pippen, the Bulls were able to cut the Pacer lead down to 2 at the end of the first quarter. In the second period, Larry Bird was finally able to take advantage of the biggest edge the Pacers had over the Bulls, their bench. After 2 quiet games in Chicago, the Pacers' second unit was a massive factor in this game, hitting critical shots and making all the hustle plays. Antonio Davis, Jalen Rose, and Travis Best combined to score 36 points off the Pacers' bench and were causing some serious matchup problems for Chicago. But in spite of the positives for Indiana, it was Michaeljordan who owned the second quarter, scoring 11 of his 30 points and making sure that the Bulls had a 4-point lead and had the Pacers on the ropes to close out the first half.
Michael spinning, shooting, and hitting.
In the third quarter, disaster struck for Indiana when Reggie Miller severely sprained his ankle. With their entire season and series on the line, the Pacers had to watch their leader limp off the court and back into the locker room. And the Chicago Bulls realized that with Miller injured, this truly was the time to go for the kill.
Doug, right now, Chicago's going for blood. They smell it.
Miller emerged from the tunnel and hobbled his way back onto the court to rejoin the game in the fourth quarter. And with 4.5 minutes left and Indiana hanging on to a narrow 2-point advantage, crunch time was about to be Miller time. Reggie would start off by drifting away to the corner and hitting a quick catch-and-shoot 3.
You got to put your best players in the game right now and get them the ball.
Reggie then curled out to the top of the key and hit another. And with each shot, he was absolutely electrifying the Indiana crowd.
3 seconds to shoot. It's Reggie. And it's Indiana by 8.
Battling through injury, Miller somehow brought the Pacers to the brink of victory. But a team like Chicago with championship DNA just does not go away. Scottie got a lucky bounce on a 3, and just a few moments later, Steve Kerr would hustle to grab a rebound, dish it out to Michael, who would also hit from downtown, cutting the Pacer lead to 1. With about 10 seconds left in the game, the Bulls were forced to foul Reggie Miller as Ron Harper sent him tumbling into his own bench and forcing the Davis boys to get up off their seats. Reggie would hit both their free throws, scoring 13 points in the final 4.5 minutes of this game as the Pacers hung on to beat the Bulls and get back into this series. In Game 3, Reggie Miller finally broke loose, scoring 28 points and helping Indiana stay alive in this series. But his ankle injury was a major concern for them, and it could have a serious impact on his production in their crucial games ahead. But one of the major factors in Game 3 other than Reggie was of course Indiana's bench. Antonio Davis, Derek McKee, Jalen Rose, and Travis Best each played over 22 minutes in this game, as Larry Bird finally utilized their greatest strength, their depth. Indiana's second unit would outscore Chicago's bench 43-25 in this game. But the impact that the Pacers' bench had on this game went beyond the numbers. Players like Antonio Davis and Travis Best were causing some serious matchup problems for Chicago. Both the Davis boys were able to outmuscle Tony Kukoc anytime he was on the floor. Meanwhile, the pace and quickness of Travis Best was a problem that Phil Jackson struggled to solve at the point guard spot. But in spite of all this, the Bulls felt that there was nothing to worry about. Michaeljordan described the loss as nothing more than a bump in the road, while Phil Jackson saw that the Pacers needed every single thing to go right for them in order to barely squeeze out a 2-point win. The Bulls still had firm control of this series, and in Game 4, they would have one more chance to put Indiana on the brink. To start Game 4, the two big questions were, how would the Chicago Bulls bounce back from their Game 3 setback? And could Reggie Miller still be a factor despite his injured ankle? As the game got underway, it quickly became apparent that Reggie Miller's ankle injury would severely limit his movement and mobility in this game. And for a player who's so heavily dependent on his off-ball movement, this was a major setback. But with Reggie struggling, Rick Smits took matters into his own hands, Smits finally had a breakout game in this series, scoring 26 points and shooting 59% from the field. Smits was also involved in an incident in the first quarter where he blocked Jordan's shot and caught him above the right eye with his follow-through. MJ was cut open and needed stitches before returning to the game. In a very physical series, it seemed like Indiana's win in Game 3 added a layer of feistiness and edginess between these two teams. After a slow start, Jordan picked up his play in the second quarter, and he would lead all scorers in this game with 28 points. But MJ wasn't doing it alone. In this game, Phil Jackson leaned heavily on a six-man rotation, and it paid off, as all 5 of Chicago's starters scored in double figures. With this team effort, the Bulls took a 9-point lead heading into the fourth quarter, and it looked like they had the Pacers on the ropes. But the Pacers would once again start to rally behind their second unit. Indiana's bench would give them 19 fourth-quarter points. And this basket from Travis Best with 33.5 seconds left in the game would bring the Pacers within 1. Moments later, Indiana would have the chance to take the lead, but would fail to cleanly inbound the ball and would foul Scottie Pippen, sending him to the free throw line. And for the second straight game, Reggie Miller and Ron Harper would get into it. The officials did not want technical fouls to influence the outcome of such a critical game, so they chose to swallow the whistle on this one. But all the pressure and all the responsibility now fell on Scottie Pippen's shoulders. Pippen had 2 absolutely critical free throws to try and give the Bulls a 3-point advantage. Pippen would miss the first. He had to make the second to give the Bulls a 2-point lead. Pippen missed again, and the ball would go out of bounds. The officials would initially call a jump ball, but in a very tight decision, Indiana would be given possession of the basketball and a chance to win this game. And with 2.9 seconds left came the moment that would shift this entire series.
Harper's on Miller. McKee gets it in the middle for the win. It's there! 4/10 of a second. One of the greatest clutch playoff performers of his generation has apparently done it again.
And just like that, for the second straight game, Miller struck in crunch time, shoving Jordan out of the way and hitting one of the biggest shots of his entire career. But one man who knew a thing or two about greatness knew that there was still time on the clock, and he knew that the Chicago Bulls had number 23. With just 0.7 of a second left, Michaeljordan somehow managed to get his shot off and almost managed to win this game for Chicago. The Pacers hung on to win this game, and the Bulls now knew that they had a series on their hands.
Knowing Michael and knowing the competitive drive that he has, I know on that flight home, he is cursing and cussing everyone out on that plane. So I know they'll be ready for Wednesday.
Still got to come through Chicago. Utah, Indiana, they still got to come through Chicago. I don't care what happens today, I don't care what happened in the other series. Still got to come through Chicago.
With back-to-back clutch performances, Reggie Miller and the Pacers had turned what once looked like a simple 4 or 5 game series into an absolute war. It was a matter of a few seconds and a few inches that changed the entire outlook of this series. Each of the 4 games in this series so far was decided by a margin of single digits. The Bulls won both of their games at home by 6, while the Pacers won theirs just by 2. Indiana now posed a serious threat to the Bulls dynasty. And while everybody loves to talk about Larry Bird's reaction to Reggie Miller's game winner, perhaps it was Phil Jackson's reaction that showed a truer picture of where things actually stood. Looking ahead to Game 5, a significant incident occurred during Reggie Miller's altercation with Ron Harper. The Pacers were handed a significant blow as Jalen Rose would face a one-game suspension for leaving Indiana's bench during the incident. As the series now returned to the United Center, it took on a very different mood from when we left in Game 2. And it was now the Bulls who were searching for answers. Having lost back-to-back games, the Chicago Bulls found themselves in an unfamiliar position. The Bulls were now at risk, but the Bulls were now at home, and they had to use Game 5 to make a statement. And a statement is exactly what they would make. All the tension, all of the pregame hype would soon prove to be anticlimactic as the Chicago Bulls would come out to absolutely dominate the Indiana Pacers. Chicago had everything going for them, with their big three on offense combining for 67 points in this game. Kukoc with 19, Scottie Pippen with 20, and of course, MJ leading the way with 29 points. And on top of that, the Bulls' defense was at its stifling best, limiting Indiana to just 34% shooting from the field. The Bulls had run the Pacers off the court and now had a chance to close out this series in Game 6. It was an absolute thrashing, but the Pacers would have to dig deep and find a way to keep their season and this series alive as the scene shifted back to Indiana for Game 6. With their backs to the wall, the Pacers now found themselves in a must-win situation against one of the greatest NBA teams ever assembled. For the Pacers, it was now or never. With Reggie Miller still bothered by the ankle injury, the Pacers' plan was simple: feed the ball inside to your big men and let them go to work. And both of Indiana's starting bigs played with ridiculous efficiency. Dale Davis bullied Tony Kukoc on his way to 19 points on 7 of 9 shooting from the field, while Rick Smits shot an absurd 92% from the field on his way to leading the Pacers with 25 points in this game. But Michaeljordan was absolutely determined to end this series. With his 35 points for the 6th consecutive time in this series, Michaeljordan would lead all scorers and would put on an absolute clinic. MJ did get some timely contributions from his teammates as well, with Scottie Pippen chipping in with 19 points, and Luke Longley scoring 13 points and grabbing 8 rebounds for Chicago. But the Pacers bench, and in particular Travis Best, would continue to be a thorn in Chicago's side, chipping in with timely passes and critical baskets down the stretch. And fittingly enough, with everything on the line in a closely contested game, the Bulls and the Pacers found themselves tied at 87 with less than 40 seconds left. With their entire season hanging in the balance, Travis Best would use his speed to blow by Steve Kerr and put the Pacers up by 2. Jordan and Best would then exchange a pair of clutch free throws, and with 8.5 seconds left in the game and the Bulls down by 2, Michaeljordan had the ball in his hands.
It's Michael. That's the guy to watch. He stumbles and loses it. McKee has it. The Pacers and the Bulls will take it to the limit.
The Pacers and the Bulls were going to Game 7.
Certainly the fans of Chicago have been hungry for a winner for a long time. What are they? They expect you to be the savior.
Well, naturally, the expectation is going to be high. And right now, the best thing for me is to try to fit in with this ball club and try to mingle and become a winning team.
And the Bulls didn't just become a winning team. They became one of the most dominant dynasties in NBA history. But for Michaeljordan and the Chicago Bulls, greatness was a journey that required them to endure failure, to overcome setbacks, and to eventually mold themselves into a force unlike any the league had ever seen before. It was clear that this dynasty was being brought to an end. But would it end in triumph, or would it end in Game 7? Six grueling games had all led to this, Game 7. For the Chicago Bulls, this was unfamiliar territory, while for the Pacers, this was their third Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals in 5 years. And as the game got underway, that Game 7 experience for Indiana would become evident. The Pacers were calm, confident, and were executing their plans to perfection. Indiana were absolutely on fire to start this game, hitting on all 8 of their first field goal attempts and jumping out to a 13-point lead in the first quarter. And while Indiana had everything going for them, the Bulls came out extremely flat. Chicago was visibly tentative and were making uncharacteristic mistakes. With a double-digit deficit in the first quarter itself, the Bulls were looking down a hole and they needed a lift. And as Dennis Rodman checked into the game in the first quarter, he brought with him a sudden change in momentum. The Bulls were now making all the hustle plays and were chipping away at the Pacers' lead. Chicago would carry that rhythm into the second quarter when Michaeljordan would absolutely take over the Bulls' offense with 13 of his 28 points coming in the second period. Indiana was losing their grip on this game, and it was all happening while their trusted second unit was on the floor. Indiana's bench was a major advantage for them in this series, but they were failing to deliver when it mattered most. But the defining stat of this second quarter was on the glass, where the Bulls out-rebounded the Pacers 17-4. MJ and Rodman would get plenty of help from players like Jud Buechler and Steve Kerr, as the Bulls would complete a 20-point swing to take a 7-point lead.
It's Kerr. His three is there.
Indiana needed a way to get back into this game, and of course it would be Miller. Reggie would hit 2 massive threes within the final minute of the first half to get the Pacers back within 1.
Reggie for 3 again. Good again. A 1-point game, just under 10 seconds.
In a seesaw battle, the Bulls managed to hang on to a narrow advantage at the end of the first half. As the third quarter got underway, the Pacers had their starting unit back on the floor, and they were executing at both ends with all their key pieces contributing. But the third quarter would soon turn into a battle between the entire Pacer team and Tony Kukoc. Kukoc came out smoking hot in the third quarter, hitting all 5 of his field goal attempts and scoring 14 of the Bulls' 21 points in the quarter. Kukoc almost single-handedly carried the Bulls in the third quarter as they took a narrow 4-point advantage into the final period. But in the fourth quarter, the Pacers would start to rally once again, and they would look inside to Rick Smits, who would lead the way with 9 points in the fourth quarter. It didn't matter what Michaeljordan and the Bulls threw at them. The Indiana Pacers kept finding a way back. They kept going blow to blow with the 5-time defending champions and the greatest player of all time. Trailing by 3 with just minutes left, the Bulls had to dig deeper than they ever did in any of their championship runs. And then came one of the defining moments of Game 7. In a jump ball between the 7'4 Smits and the 6'6 Jordan, Smits would win the tip, but it would end up in Scotty's hands. Pippen would then find a wide-open Steve Kerr.
Kerr can tie it, and does!
In the critical moments of this game, the Bulls' championship experience was coming through. And they were doing it as a team, not just on Michael's shoulders. Down the stretch when it mattered most, Michael was able to trust his teammates to make the big shots. But Michaeljordan's contribution on the defensive end in this fourth quarter was absolutely massive. Jordan chased Reggie Miller like a shadow in this final quarter, denying him the ball and limiting Reggie Miller to just 1 field goal attempt in the entire quarter. And in the final moments of this game, the Bulls would finally be able to put the Indiana Pacers away. But it took every ounce of experience, composure, and championship resolve to finally close the door on Indiana.
What Michaeljordan termed a bump in the road was anything but. It was a mountain to climb.
The Pacers lost this game by the thinnest of margins. In the end, the telling stat was on the boards. Indiana was out-rebounded 50-34 in this game, and as a result had 22 fewer shot attempts than Chicago. After 7 grueling games, the Chicago Bulls didn't beat the Indiana Pacers. They barely survived them. The Indiana Pacers would once again fall short in the conference finals the following year, before finally making it through to the NBA Finals in the year 2000. Reggie Miller would eventually retire without a championship, but as the clutch shots kept falling and the big playoff moments kept piling up, his legacy to Indiana Pacer fans would become untouchable. And for the Chicago Bulls, they would go on and win their 6th championship in 1998, defeating the Utah Jazz in 6 games. But despite their success, the Chicago front office would follow through on their decision to disband this legendary team. The Chicago Bulls, with Michaeljordan in the team, never failed to defend their NBA championship throughout their run. And in the end, their last dance wasn't just a memorable one. It was a lasting image of absolute greatness.